think that's really important, being able to understand who you're talking to, not to be mistaken with chemistry. If we may not have like the best chemistry, it could still be a fantastic relationship.
If we're so afraid of failing or of admitting to failure, that very much does limit the amount of risk that you're going to take.
12 months and 12 years. We want to see a like ridiculously big vision so far into the future that you can't plan for it, because there's so many assumptions and uncertainties. Like, yeah, I don't know what I'm having for dinner today, so I don't know what a company will be doing 12 years from now. The topic I wanted to discuss, it's kind of a question, which is like, how do we make sure that more of the public conversation around sort of startups and early stage in Norway is shifted from an external focus to an internal focus. So this is, I'm not sure if you would call it a pet peeve, but this is somewhat of a frustration of mine that whenever I see an investor or a founder in the media talking about something, it could be like around not going the way you want, the company shutting down, whatever it is, like there's very little room, or like at least like in what we see publicly, very little sort of self-reflection, accountability. We could have done this differently, we could have done that differently. Very much sort of pointing fingers at politicians, investors, founders are not working hard enough, whatever it is. And the inward focus, which is sort of where it's really hard to change others, like it's really hard to change oneself, but at least you can do something about it. There's not that much room for that, or like the public conversation doesn't really have too much of that sort of inward-facing retrospectiveness. This is how we could have improved. But like, how do we shift that conversation so that we have more sort of accountability and talk about what we could do better ourselves?
It's a big topic, but you know, if you have...
I think it's like, it's partially, your question is around culture, I think, right? And it's like creating like a sense of consistency that you want to do that, like down to the company level or the fund level or the founder level. Like, okay, this year I want to be a bit more aggressive in terms of reflecting. So I'm setting these targets week to week or even quarter to quarter, whether it be with an investor or within themselves or within the company, to say like, okay, what can we do better with what's going on externally, like, you know. So I think my first thought is it's like implementing it in your day-to-day. Because if you don't do that, it kind of just gets lost, because it's much easier to blame or talk about the easy things. The easy things in the media as well as like what did something else, what was triggered by something else, right?
Yeah.
But it's much harder to then blame yourself or like even push yourself up, right? I think.
Yeah.
So that was my initial thinking, right? Just like the repeatability. But I don't know, it's much easier said than done, because you have to siphon out some time.
Yeah, so you're saying it's like starting off camera or sort of outside of the media with the dialogues that you have in real life, and sort of making sure that you begin the reflection there, and then sort of as you progress into the public view, you can keep the same mentality. We do sometimes sort of after, especially if like a deal that didn't go the way we wanted, or bigger sort of events where it is like someone does look like where should the finger be pointed. We have separate like post-mortem sessions, like going through the process, where did it go wrong, what can we learn, and I think that's really valuable and something that we can take sort of that fits well in other forums as well, whether it's vis-a-vis founders, LPs, but sort of being more proactive and willing to learn from the, not mistakes, but sort of things that didn't go the way that you planned or wanted to.
And I think like, from my perspective, I would love to see more people sort of try to at least shift the conversation a bit inwardly, like, because every failed thing, and I think this is sort of this American meme where like we have to embrace failure and whatnot, and I think like Americans are not as good as they say they are at it, but they're better than the European at sort of embracing failure, because there are growth opportunities in every failure. Like, so you can always turn around like what we'll do next time. It's like a good framing of like at least taking some accountability of like, okay, you weren't able to raise funding for your company. Next time we'll knock on more doors, or next time we'll do better cash planning, or next time we'll sort of have better milestones so that we know that we can actually sort of get a proper funding round the next round also.
And there's an interesting cultural aspect to that. I think that if we're so afraid of failing or of admitting to failure, like that very much does limit the amount of risk that you're going to take, which of course in sort of a venture context is not driving towards the biggest outcomes. I think there's also something about sort of celebrating the failures as sort of a necessary way on that upward trajectory that I think we could collectively do better at to sort of encourage a more risk-taking and forward-leaning mentality in the Norwegian venture ecosystem.
100%.
So my topic is about kind of what investors look for beyond the pitch deck and the criteria that we have in our funds, because I think founders typically know what the criteria are, but there are certain things that I think it's perhaps down to the individual, but also down to the culture of the fund that we can't really put on paper per se, but it's something we intuitively look for. So I was curious to get your thoughts. I think maybe to narrow it in on like perhaps the first 5 to 10 minutes when you meet a founder, what are the things that like excite you, take away the problem itself or the solution about the person that's on the other side. So just as an example for me, and this is something that has evolved over time, I'd say like more recently, this is what gets me more excited, which is when the first 5 minutes, the founder really talks about like his why or her why, or their why, and like their actual story, as opposed to just getting into, this is the problem that we're solving, and this is our traction, blah, blah, blah. Because then it means that the problem and the solution later on becomes a bit more personal, and I'm kind of linking it back to this person's story. And it makes it better, I think, like just the flow and the conversation. So that is one thing that I don't think I would ever put on a checklist, right? So is there stuff that you guys think of in those first 15 minutes?
For me, that passion really resonates the way that you describe it. I think sometimes it's really like almost sad to see sort of founders like on paper, it's like, wow, fantastic business idea, great opportunity. But they've really come at it from that analytical, like, okay, I want to do something else. What can I do that will sort of look good on paper and seem super attractive? But very sort of clinically removed from the problem that they're solving in the way that they talk about it. And for me, like, I'm someone, I like to get passionate about topics. And so when I see founders equally passionate about what they're doing, like, you just instinctively sort of want to be part of that journey. And I think also the likelihood of that founder sticking through the tough times because they're really on a personal mission to solve something that they care about is so much higher. So I think the passion can also be a good sort of early indicator of grit and sort of willingness to stick with the problem in tough times.
Yeah, I think like I partially agree on the passion part, but at the same time, like there are a lot of counter examples in like history. Jeff Bezos, she sort of just looked at the internet is big. How can you do e-commerce? Like you have no shelf life on books. Let's go after this opportunity, and it's big. And let's say Slack and Twitter companies started out doing podcasting and gaming, and then like they pivoted into something where they sort of initially it wasn't their passion, but they saw an opportunity. And I think like good people can be motivated by just building a big company, regardless. But for sure, like it's easier sort of emotionally to relate when there's passion. But even though I don't have like the same sort of strong attachment to the passion, I usually start with the question of why still, because it's like a good sort of foundation or root as to like what is this story about. But what I listen more carefully to is more, are they a good editor? And by editor, I mean like, are they able to sort of understand who I am, what I care about, or do they just sort of blurb out? Do they give me like a water hose, 30 minutes rambling about everything that they think is exciting without sort of understanding who I am?
That's actually a good point. Maybe like a two-part follow-up to that is because I think that's really important, being able to understand who you're talking to. Not to be mistaken with chemistry, because I think I made the mistake previously where it's like, I'm always asking myself, can I see myself working with this person for 10 years? And actually, if the person is empathetic, but we may not have like the best chemistry, that could still be a fantastic opportunity for both of us. It could still be a fantastic relationship. As long as the founder, who maybe doesn't have the best chemistry with the investor, understands what the ask is in a given time, in a given quarter when it comes to like reporting. Question on like Norwegian founders, maybe more specifically. I know you focus on Norway, but I'm sure you've met founders outside of Norway, and you guys invest across
Northern
the board.
Europe, yeah.
Do you see things, and it doesn't have to be related to chemistry or empathy, but do you see things that founders in Norway, or trends that they're actually particularly good at, or actually they need to learn a thing or two from other parts of the world? It doesn't have to be personality either, right? It's just...
I was really hoping we would touch on this in relation to the pitch deck, because I think one thing that I often actually tell founders is you need to be a bit more forward-leaning in your projections. Like, I'm seeing your business plan next to business plans that have probably very little basis in reality, but it's getting me excited about the trajectory. And then, I go and take a haircut to that plan, and I sort of look at it with new eyes. So I cannot use that same methodology with a business plan that's sort of with 100% certainty. This is what I can guarantee will deliver. So I think that's a Norwegian or maybe Nordic mentality. I see it also sort of in other Scandinavian countries, but I think that's something
overly pragmatic or overly conservative?
Yeah, overly conservative, actually, not wanting to brag, or there's some elements of this in our culture that I think are detrimental, because I can tell, because I'm Norwegian, so I understand the context where they're coming from, and if you bother to sort of dig down, you're like, wow, you have 100% coverage for this, revenue projection. That's actually pretty impressive. But if you're just sort of screening from first deck, and you're an international investor receiving this next to, some San Francisco deck, you're not going to get to the first meeting. So I think that's something I think we need to work on with Norwegian founders to be a bit more forward-leaning. Okay, so I want to talk about the value of planning. And it might not sound like the most exciting topic, but I really think if you bear with me, we can get to some good insights. It came to me because we're working with several of our portfolio companies these days on updating 2 to 5 year plans, aligning on key priorities and milestones. So it's reminded me about what a valuable exercise that is. It's something that we also do ahead of every new investment. So sort of sit together with the company co-investors, agreeing sort of what's the game plan for the investment. And I think it is really important in the context, especially of investing as minority owners in syndicates, being agreed from day one what we want to achieve with this company. It makes for more effective board meetings, and it really helps us to add value as investors. So I'm curious, from your perspectives, with your sort of investment strategies and ownership philosophies, how do you think about the value of planning, if at all?
We think about a lot, and so typically we invest super early, like pre-seed, seed, and we don't take board seats. We're not sort of tracking the plan necessarily month to month, but with our fund size, we can lead at pre-seed, we cannot lead at seed, and we can definitely not lead at A, meaning that the next round we will never be able to lead. That means we need an external funder to come in the next round, and the first conversation we have after we sort of wire the money, or usually we have it way before we even wire the money or decide to invest, is just where does this company need to be next time we raise money? What are the milestones? How are we de-risking? How are we proving to next level investors that this company is actually on track to become a really big company? So the 2-year plan, the 5-year plan, we don't care too much about. Typically we talk about 12 months and 12 years. We want to see a ridiculously big vision, this big company in 12 years, but so far into the future that you can't plan for it, because there's so many assumptions and uncertainties, I don't know what I'm having for dinner today, so I don't know what a company will be doing 12 years from now.
I'm very aligned. I think sometimes we've gotten feedback when we're talking to prospective founders that we can drill a bit too much in their plan, but I'd rather drill too much than drill less, because especially at the stage that we invest in, because yes, you can be sold on the vision, but at the Series A, the next round is the really tough part. And I think investors who are investing later than us are even more critical. Because it becomes less and less about the team and more about the numbers. Yeah. And so if we don't see that they have a plan A, B, and C, and it's realistic realistic plan, not only is it about us deploying capital in the next rounds, but it's also like optics, right? Like when we are pitching to our friends who are in the later stage investors, like we can actually say like, this didn't go well, but, and then that's the conversation continues, right? Because the founder or we have coordinated a situation where scenario planning, right? I think on the flip side, from an investor perspective, we have to do a lot of planning because of the sector that we're in, which is climate. And I think it's, with climate in and of itself, like the return profile is very different from like regular VC, I think. And as a result of that, we have quite a broad mandate. It's like really industry agnostic, deep tech, software, marketplaces. And so naturally, it's very hard to be very strict into like one path and be very formulaic. And so you have to be you have to kind of keep checking yourself with every new investment. Like, okay, how does this match to the rest of the portfolio? Which isn't always a good thing. Like if you look at a playbook, ideally you only say one rule, power law, these are the 20 investments. But I think specifically with climate tech, you kind of have to try and manage, which is tough. It's really tough, and I don't think that it's more about the act of doing it rather than being a perfectionist at planning, in my eyes.
Yeah. For us, it's at least a big topic these days as we're sort of nearing the end of our first fund. Like, what are those final investments that will be complementary to the portfolio as a whole? And so sort of it gets harder and harder and harder to find those last investments because you're not starting with a blank canvas the way that you did at the start.
I also wanted to touch a bit on what you recently said with like goal setting and sort of merging that with what we talked about with like local founders being more conformist than they should have been. Because there's like this thing called Parkinson's law, which says that like things take as much time as you allocate to it. And in a sort of planning perspective or setting, that means like if you say we're going to have 3x revenue in a year, you're going to spend a year to get the 3x revenue. And I think like some of the best founders we're seeing, they're able to sort of just break that down completely and just say we're going to like have like massively higher goals or like shorter term goals. Maybe you're not sort of fully there, but just like daring to be very non-conformist also internally, just like we're going to have much more aggressive goals than any other company out there. So our triple, double kind of strategy that's not for us. We're going to be a 10 kind of company, which is like just breaking out of this pattern where like where you think like planning for where you think you need to be, but rather what's the most aggressive thing we could do, and if you do that successfully, I think like the companies will be so much better. But then the difficult thing also is just like on the planning side is usually like we see companies that set like a 12-month plan or like a 2-year plan, and there is also this sort of I see so many founders who struggle because there's no forcing function. It's like having an exam in a year. For sure, you're not going to read in January if your exam is in December because, it's like I'll do it like I'll procrastinate for a couple of months. So also figuring out as a company how do you sort of accelerate development so you actually make sure you do it month number 1, 2, 3, and not just 10, 11, 12.